Hey there everyone, welcome on into VG Emporium, video game music and more. I'm your host Rage Cage, and today we're going to be checking out a couple soundtracks here, these being Mahjong Fantasia and If. And these two games happen to have a lot in common. Same developer, that being Active Software. Same composers, these being Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. They are both FM, and they have the same kind of content, which we will get into a little bit later. So getting right into it, we're starting off with Mahjong Fantasia, which is what the song that we opened up with is from, and this is opening, Ballad, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And as you can hear, this is a Baroque classic style song, though to me that doesn't really make much sense because this game, Mahjong Fantasia, is a medieval fantasy setting, but hey, whatever works. So now I hear ya. You may be wondering, medieval fantasy setting? Mahjong? How do those go together? Well, allow me to yarn you a tale here. So the story centers around an evil witch called Belladonna, who can only be defeated with the sacred power of the 136 Mahjong stones. The protagonist is a young Mahjong warrior, Ring, who must win a Mahjong tournament in order to seal Belladonna once and for all. So again, I know exactly what you're thinking. That still doesn't answer my question as to why there's Mahjong in a medieval fantasy place, and I really wish I could answer that question, but that's all I got for you. Really, that's all I got, other than all this music that comes from the game, which I'm gonna play you another track here. This is heavy music, Pop, from Mahjong Fantasia, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And that was Heavy Music, Pop, from Mahjong Fantasia, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And I bet you weren't expecting Streets of Baroque now, were ya? Yeah, I can imagine these two guys, Keishi and Yasuo, hearing what Yuzo's doing with Streets of Rage, possibly even Streets of Rage 2, because this game was released in 1992, so it could have been within the realm of possibility that, after Streets of Rage 2 would get it back. And I could just imagine these two guys hearing what Yuzo Koshiro was doing with Streets of Rage and just being like, holy crap, we got to get up on that, put a Baroque twist on that. Bam! And it's definitely not the last time you'll be hearing something like this. So now, Mahjong Fantasia. Developed and published by Active Software in 1992. And as the name would suggest, it is a Mahjong game. And then there's a story mode where you play as Ring and you play through Mahjong matches, working your way to eventually Belladonna. And then there's a versus mode where you play against the computer against all the different characters you play in story mode. So pretty standard stuff. Play Mahjong, win Mahjong, play Mahjong, win Mahjong, beat game, more Mahjong. Yeah. So as I mentioned, the version that we're going to be hearing today is the SharpX 68K version. So this is using the YM2151 FM sound chip, which is also accompanied by the Occam 6258, which offers a single channel of sample playback where the majority of the percussion, the kick, snare, and those claps are coming from. So now we're going to get into our next track, this being In-Game Playing Mahjong from Mahjong Fantasia, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And you just heard In-Game Playing Mahjong from Mahjong Fantasia, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. Though if I hadn't known it was them's, I would have said that this was something by Takeshi Abo. It's that bass line, I tell ya. And this might be a good place to tell you about these composers, Yasuo Ito and Keishi Yonao. So for Yasuo, there really isn't much. There's only Mahjong Fantasia in 92, Mahjong Fantasia 2 in 93, and then voice cutting and embedding for Bible Black in 2000. And then Keishi Yonao, which I've talked about a few times on the show, and he was actually one of my Masters of EGM back in 2022 when that started. That would be episode 22, Masters of EGM. And I pretty much gave the full rundown on him, so definitely check that out. But just a few games of note that he has done. His earlier works include Neural Gear, Mad Stalker Full Metal Force, Asuka 120% Burning Fest, and then jumping ahead, he did a couple ending themes for Galgun Double Piece, as well as arrangement for Azure Striker Gunvolt 2, as well as for Gunvolt Chronicles Luminous Avenger X and X2, and then his latest credit is sound effect design for Phantom Breaker Omnia. So again, if you'd like to know more about Keishi Yonao, check out episode 22, Masters of EGM. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of commonalities between the two games that I'm sharing with you today, some that you already know now. The one that I haven't revealed though you probably already guessed, seeing that this is a Mahjong game on a Japanese PC, is, yes, adult content. Nudie times. So yes, this turns us into strip Mahjong, which brings us into our next track, Undress Mode Select, from Mahjong Fantasia, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And that was Undress Mode Select from Mahjong Fantasia, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. So our noble hero Ring, now that's a name, is of course on a quest to defeat Belladonna. But in order to do so, he must face many opponents in Mahjong, and his opponents are pretty young ladies. So yes, after you defeat your opponent in Mahjong, they end up being in various states of undress. Though, you know, it is mostly toplessness with some tattered clothing, though compared to other games that are on these computers, it's pretty tame. So this doesn't really belong in the adults only section. This is more just something, you know, that's kept towards the back on a higher shelf. And, you know, that's pretty much all I have on this game is, you know, it's a Mahjong game with adult content, with a medieval fantasy setting, has pretty cool ass music, and that the main character's name is Ring, of all things. But there are a few other names that we know. So Belladonna is the big bad here. And then in the OST, there are two names. There's Brunhild's theme and Raspberry's theme, which I don't know which or who these characters are. You know, looking at the screenshots, there's no caption saying who's what. But anyway, what we're going to hear next is Raspberry's theme from Mahjong Fantasia, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And that was Raspberry's theme from Mahjong Fantasia, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And like I said, I have no idea who Raspberry is in the context of the story. And yeah, I don't really have much more to say about this game, like I said, but what I can tell you about is the company that developed and published this, that being Active Software. It was founded in 1991 in Kyoto, Japan, and it was focused primarily on making adult games for computers. and they were active until about 2002. So now to list off the games they made, we got in 1991, Santa-kun, which is not what you think. It is actually about an otaku that encounters a crazed Santa-like man that, in return for answering his quizzes, will grant him the wish of, having his way with magical girls. Yeah. So then in 1992, we got Mahjong Fantasia, as well as Sweet Angel. In 1993, we got If, which we'll be covering next. Then 93 as well, Mahjong Fantasia 2. Then there's If 2, Mahjong Dipan in 94, Gakuen Bomber in 94, Gunblaze, If 3, Mahjong Fantasia the third stage in 95, Kusuri Yubi no Kyokasho, Angel Halo, Heartwork, the game, Gunblaze S on Sega Saturn in 98, Bible Black, the game, which is the big one, Mahjong Fantasia 2, 2001 edition, and then their last credit in 2002 being Discipline, Record of a Crusade. So now something interesting about Active Software is that they were part in the foundation of the Ethics Organization of Computer Software, which not only aimed to impose an age rating on Japanese software, but then to also outlaw graphic sexual scenes depicting those that are underage. So now, 2 years after their last game, in 2004, Active Software was disbanded as a company, though the development team would found another company, Mitsubishi Incorporated, in 2005 and create one game, 7. And then they disbanded in 2009. And that's all there is on Active Software and Mahjong Fantasia. So we'll close this section out with Ending from Mahjong Fantasia, which will then be followed immediately by Scene Intro, which will bring us into If. And it's going to be quite the tonal shift. And of course, these were both composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. that was Scenario Intro from If, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And yep, we made the switch from Baroque House to PC90 Funk, which is how I'm telling you that we are listening to the PC98 version of the soundtrack, made using the YM2203, so 3 FM, 3 SSG, and these boys are really working it. The FM's covering the bass, the lead, and the percussion, and then of course the SSG covering those nice little chords in the back. So If, which is short for Invitation from Fantastic Stories, and it is a visual novel game that has 4 different scenarios that you can choose from. And it's got a nice collection of visual novel styles, like the first 2 scenarios has choices that you can make which then can branch off the story path, so resulting in maybe a couple different endings, as well as a few different game over moments. And then the other 2 are just linear stories, maybe with a few choices, but that don't really affect anything because they only have 1 ending. And of course, this being an active software game with their focus on adult-oriented software, all the scenarios contain very adult scenes. And it's not as light as Mahjong Fantasia. You know, some of the scenes actually show some genitalia, though those are covered up by dithered white blocks, but you know, you can kind of see through just enough to be able to tell they put the details there, as well as some moments where there's touching down in them in other regions and some juices flowing. But still, you know, it's light enough to where it's not quite in the adult section again, but you know, right outside of it though. So you don't have to go in there and deal with Sal, but you have to just try not to make enough noise to where he'll notice and come out and, you know, yeah. Now, one last thing I'll note before moving on to our next track is that the art in this game looks really good. It is a definite jump from the art of Mahjong Fantasia. You know, the tones of the colors, the shading add some nice depth. The backgrounds kind of range from flat, basic looking kind of stuff to some really nice detail. And of course, the adult scenes probably got a little bit more from the art budget. And so now we'll get into our next track here. And this is coming from the first scenario, Kazuya's Gloomy Day. This is BGM 1 from If, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And that was BGM 1 of the scenario Kazuya's Gloomy Day from If, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And I would say this song fits nicely into the OPN version of the Ground Seed soundtrack. You know, I know the OPNA version, which is largely composed by Ryo Uemoto and Ryo Takami, gets a lot of attention, but I feel the OPN version deserves just as much attention. But we're not here to talk about Groundseed, we're here to talk about If and the scenario, Kazuya's Gloomy Day. And the story on this one stars a 19-year-old young man who accidentally makes a wish and summons a cute-looking female demon who is ready to serve her master in various ways, including what you just thought. Looking like Kazuya's day isn't that gloomy anymore, huh? Because before the demon girl showed up, he tried to relieve his gloom by watching some naughty videos. So now this demon girl, she has pointy ears, kind of a tan skin tone, kind of like a dark elf, has long green hair, wears a tight-fitting purple dress with a short skirt, so a lot of panty shots, purple lacy stockings, and nice purple pointy boots. And she floats. No screenshots I could see of Kazuya though. Maybe let's just imagine that he's like a younger, loser version of Kazuya Mishima from Tekken. Yeah, that makes things fun, yeah? So you may have gathered that, you know, from the way how the story sounds and the way I'm treating it, this is more of a comedic story. And that's the thing about all these different scenarios. They have different tones and styles, so hey, let's just get into our next one here. So this is going to be Triangle, BGM 1, from If, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And that was BGM 1 of the scenario Triangle from If, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And the story of this one is about a high school student who has a rather uneasy relationship with a girl he likes. One day, he meets a female childhood friend, which further complicates his love life. Thus, the title of the scenario, Triangle. And just from the sound of the song and the other BGM and just the story and just a few screenshots I've seen, it's probably more of like a light drama romance. And of course, all the characters in this scenario are over the age of 18, or should be. You know, seeing as Active Software was a part of founding the EOCS. And this is all I have for you on this one. You know, the story's pretty straightforward. This has the least amount of screenshots I could find. And then as far as the song goes, it sounds like something pretty standard you hear in a romance visual novel or dating sim. You know, nothing too special, but, you know, gets the job done. So moving on to the next scenario, which seems to be a little bit more interesting. It is Kikyou's Flower, BGM 2, from If, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. was BGM 2 for Kikyou's Flower from If, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And I want to say the arpeggiation here with the SSG reminds me a lot of Hirohiko Takayama. If you haven't listened to his stuff, you got games like Xixxes, Friday the 13th, Monster Party, all good listens. But getting back to this track, when it really kicks in, it makes me think of kind of like a somber, dramatic kind of moment in like a 1970s movie, or even like a very melodramatic ending. And then last thing, this bass, I love it. It's nice and chunky, has those nice kind of glides and the high tone slaps in just the right spots. And it fits the tone of this scenario, which is set in medieval or feudal Japan. And it tells the story of a young man who is on his way to the capital to study martial arts by a famous teacher. He gets sick and has to stay in a mountainous village. Soon he notices the strange things begin to happen there and has to find a way to release a woman from a curse that was placed on her. So yeah, just by the story's description and looking at the screenshots, this one has a little bit more of like a serious, slightly darker, uneasy tone. Because yeah, this story involves our hero finding himself in like this village. There's a mysterious woman and she's kind of doing some things at night. There's some voyeurism going on, seeing her have some fun times with other dudes. And hear her story. It's all, I'm just going on screenshots and little captions here. I don't really have much to work with here. So, I'll just make it simpler here. Action. Tasteful boobs. Less action. Hot spring scene. Mysterious woman. Mysterious boobs. Let's get into our last scenario. And that is Money Rescue Operation. BGM 1 from If, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. Money Rescue Operation, BGM 1 from If, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito. And the story of this last scenario is that there's a young boy named Indy who lives in a small village that lies deep in the forest in a fictional country. He fancies the daughter of the village elder. One day, she is kidnapped by strangers and Indy swears to rescue her. So, pretty straightforward stuff. And looking at the screenshots, it looks like it's kind of like a fantasy setting. Though, when the scene where the elder's daughter gets kidnapped, there's a couple mooks in just regular streetwear. One of them's wearing a trench coat. So yeah, the two mooks in regular streetwear clothes kidnapping the daughter in kind of anime fantasy clothes, take her away. And so Indy, with I'm guessing his friend, girl, person, goes to rescue her, and they come upon this place that is high tech. So high tech fantasy, maybe, I don't know, rural village thing, but the village looks kind of ancient. Silly stuff going on, and there's sexy bodyguards in that place protecting the people from getting to the daughter, I guess. And there's a scene where the girl is in a very compromising position because of one of these sexy female bodyguards, and she looks to be having a great time, much to the friend girl's dismay. But of course, Indy saves the girl in the end, and they have their intimate moment. And there you go, the last scenario of If. And thus ends my great excuse for sharing some pretty cool music. Because yeah, some of the, images in these games are quite titillating, but the music, for me, is more so. Which, this song here, I really like it. And again, it sounds like something that could be from the OPN version of the Ground Seed soundtrack. And now you may have noticed that I didn't really talk about, who did which track, because there isn't really a breakdown of, which track is whose. And really, a lot of it doesn't sound like Keishi Yonao's usual style. So my imagining is that this is mostly like Yasuo Ito with Keishi Yonao doing some assist, or he's just kind of doing stuff like still figuring his sound out. I don't know, but again, he did Neural Gear, which definitely has his, that sound that I like him for. So again, maybe he's just helping out here. But yeah, that was Mahjong Fantasia and If by Active Software. And I hope you all enjoyed this. I definitely know a lot of my game/soundtrack focuses aren't really on the level of some other podcasts that do this, but I have fun doing it, and it's mostly just about sharing the cool music and having actually, in all honesty, kind of a quick one to do here. So yeah, thank you all for coming into VG Emporium, video game music and more. If this happens to be your first time in, just let you know, my episodes usually are a little bit more scattershot, like a theme and then just a whole smattering of different sounds and styles and such. But yeah, if you'd like to hear more of VG Emporium, you can find it all on the different podcatchers such as Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube Music, and there's also TerraPlayer if you'd like to try something cool, which is a hub for all kinds of different video game based podcasts, not just VGM. And then of course there's also the main website, vgemporium.wordpress.com. And hey, if you'd like to get involved, give some suggestions, some feedback, send in a special order, which is a song request, you can join the Discord, which is linked in the show notes. And in there, you may meet other shoppers that have, maybe the same obscure taste as you do. But if that's not your thing, you can send all this, the feedback, the special orders, all to the email vgemporium@gmail.com. Now getting to something else that I've noticed myself doing a little bit more recently is closing the episode out with one last song. And with this, we're circling back to that first scenario, Kazuya's Gloomy Day from If. This is Ending, composed by Keishi Yonao and Yasuo Ito.